Most people lose the day before it ever begins. They don't lose it at noon. They don't lose it at 3 in the afternoon when fatigue sets in. They lose it in the first 30 minutes after they open their eyes. And here's the troubling part. Most of them never even know it happened. I've been traveling this country and other countries, speaking to people for decades now. And one of the first things I like to ask an audience, and I want you to think about this honestly, is this. What is the very first thing you do when you wake up in the morning? Now be honest with yourself. No one's grading you here. For most people, the answer is something like they reach for their phone, or they lie there dreading the day, or they hit a button, snooze. They call it as if 5 more minutes of half sleep was going to change something, as if the morning was something to be delayed rather than claimed. Here's what I want you to consider. Every single morning, something is being built inside you. A philosophy, a set of habits, a way of approaching life. And the question is not whether this is happening. It is happening. The question is, who is in charge of it? Is it you, or is it your circumstances? Let me explain why this matters so much. I used to think that the morning was just the start of the day, nothing more. You wake up, you get ready, you go do your work. The morning was just mechanics, a doorway. You pass through it, and then the real living begins. Well, I was wrong about that for a long time. What I discovered, and it took me years to see this clearly, is that the morning is not just the start of the day. The morning is the construction of the day. It is the frame. And just like a house, if the frame is weak or crooked, everything built on top of it will be slightly off too. Maybe not enough to collapse, but enough to feel wrong. Enough to keep you one step short of what you were capable of. Most people misunderstand discipline. They think discipline is something you do during the hard moments. You grit your teeth and push through, and there's truth to that. But real discipline, the kind that changes a life, is something you build before the hard moments arrive. You build it in the quiet. In the early hours, when no one is watching, the morning is where character is assembled. And if you get the morning right, something interesting happens. You carry that rightness with you into the whole day. You make better decisions. You respond instead of reacting. You have the small reserve of strength that makes the difference when it counts. Now let me walk you through what I've learned about this. Not just ideas, but a real approach. Something you can take home tonight and begin tomorrow morning. The night before setting the stage. Now, here's something people don't think about when it comes to morning routines. They think the morning starts when you wake up. It doesn't. The morning starts the night before. Let me give you an example. Years ago, when I was early in my work, I would sometimes go to bed with no clear plan for the next day. No list, no intention. Just exhaustion and the hope that tomorrow would sort itself out. And what I found was this. When you start the day with nothing decided, you spend the first 2 hours deciding. And by the time you're making decisions, the morning, that sacred window of early time, is already gone. Mr. Schoaf, my mentor, told me something once that I've never forgotten. He said, Jim, a few minutes of thought tonight will save you an hour of confusion tomorrow. I wrote that down because it was true. So here is the first practical discipline. The night before, write down 3 things you want to accomplish the next day. Not 25 things. 3. The 3 things that, if you did them, you could go to bed knowing the day was not wasted. Some people call these priorities. I call them your commitments to yourself for the day. And then set the conditions. Go to bed at a reasonable hour. Not because sleep is some luxury. Sleep is a discipline. The body requires it. The mind requires it. You cannot ask a tired mind to do great work. Fatigue lies to you. It tells you that you're doing fine when you're not. It tells you that you'll do better tomorrow when the truth is tomorrow is built from today. The night before is preparation, and preparation is respect. Respect for the day that hasn't come yet. Respect for the work that deserves your best. The first decision of the day. Now the alarm sounds. And here is where most people make the first error of the day. They negotiate. You know what I mean. The alarm goes off, and instead of rising, the mind begins to bargain. Just 5 more minutes. I'll get up at the next one. I was up late. I deserve a little extra rest. And maybe sometimes that's true. Maybe sometimes the body needs more recovery. That's not what I'm describing. I'm describing the habit, and it is a habit, of beginning the day by saying no to yourself, by choosing the easy over the intended, by practicing in that very first moment of consciousness the discipline of surrender. Because here's what I observed. How you respond to the alarm is a preview. It's a small signal of how you'll respond to everything else that day. The uncomfortable phone call, the difficult task, the moment when the day asks something of you. And if the very first test of the day, get up as you planned, when you planned, if that one fails, you start the day with a small deficit. Not catastrophic, but cumulative. And over weeks and months, those small deficits add up. So the discipline is this. When the alarm sounds, rise. Not violently, not with some kind of aggressive performance, just rise. Make the decision that your morning self made the night before. Honor that plan. I found years ago that the first movement of the day sets a tone. It's almost like a signal you send yourself. Get up when you said you would, and something in you takes note. It says, we are people of our word, even to ourselves. That's a philosophy worth building. Silence before the noise. Once you're up, and I mean truly up, standing, moving, the next discipline I want to suggest is this. Do not immediately reach for information. And I know that might sound strange, because we live in a world that is absolutely swimming in information. There is more information available to a person today than a person in any previous century could have imagined. And I will grant you, not all of it is bad. Some of it is wonderful. But here is the problem with starting your morning by consuming other people's thoughts, other people's news, other people's noise. You never get a chance to hear your own. I learned this from a simple practice. Early in the morning, before I opened a book, before I reviewed my notes, before I spoke to anyone, I would sit quietly for a few minutes. Just sit. No agenda, no production, just the quiet. And at first, the quiet was uncomfortable. The mind doesn't like stillness right away. It wants to fill the space. It rushes toward thought, toward worry, toward planning. But if you stay with it, and this takes a little practice, something begins to settle. The noise of the previous day starts to lift. And into that quieter space, something clearer arrives. Call it what you will. Some people call it prayer. Some call it meditation. Some call it reflection. I don't think the label matters much. What matters is the practice, the deliberate choice to begin the day in communion with something deeper than the headlines. I'll tell you something honestly, some of the clearest thinking I ever did happened in those early, quiet minutes. Some of the best ideas I ever acted on came from that space. There is wisdom available to you in the silence that you simply cannot access in the noise. And the morning is one of the few places left in modern life where that silence is still possible. So protect it, even if just for 10 minutes, before the world rushes in. Moving the body. Now, I'm going to say something that I don't think anyone enjoys hearing, but the evidence is fairly consistent on this. You need to move your body in the morning. I'm not talking about becoming an athlete. I'm not talking about training for a competition. I'm talking about something much simpler. Give the body a reason to be alive and awake. When I was younger, I wasn't particularly disciplined about this. I thought exercise was something you did when you had extra time. And I can tell you from experience, if you wait until you have extra time, it won't happen. Time is not found, it's made. What I found is that when I moved in the morning, even a walk, even 20 minutes of something physical, the rest of the morning was sharper. The mind was more alert. The mood was more stable. The energy carried further into the afternoon. Here's the observation I made over the years. The body and the mind are not separate systems. What you do to one, you do to both. When you honor the body with movement and care, the mind takes note. There's a kind of confidence that comes from physical discipline, not arrogance, but the quiet self-respect of someone who keeps their commitments. And the body is one of the most honest commitments you'll ever make. It tells you the truth directly. If you neglect it, it doesn't argue with you. It just begins to show the results of that neglect. And if you honor it, it rewards you in kind. So build movement into the morning. Find something you can sustain. Walking, stretching, a bit of exercise. Do it consistently, not perfectly consistently. The goal is not to impress anyone. The goal is to signal to yourself every single morning, I am taking care of what I've been given, feeding the mind. Now we come to something that I have talked about for many, many years, and it is this. What you put into your mind in the morning becomes the material you think with for the rest of the day. Think about that. If the first thing you read in the morning is the news, and most of the news is, let's be honest, a compilation of the worst things that happened yesterday that becomes the first lens you see the day through. Not entirely, perhaps, but the mind takes what it is given. It's not particularly selective about the early inputs. I started years ago with a different practice. I called it reading for the mind, the same way you'd eat a good meal. A few pages of something worth reading, something that stretched my thinking, something that added to my philosophy rather than just filling time. It doesn't have to be long, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, a chapter. The key is consistency and intention. Reading with purpose is different from reading to pass time. When you read a few pages of something that challenges your thinking or adds to your understanding, and you do that every single morning, what happens over a year, over 5 years? I once did a simple calculation. If a person reads 10 pages a day of a good book that's not very much, 10 pages takes perhaps 15 minutes over the course of a year. They've read approximately 14 to 15 books. Now, most people read maybe 1 or 2 books a year, if that. Do that for 5 years and you begin to understand what a compounded education looks like. Your library, over time, becomes your mental infrastructure. The ideas you've encountered, the philosophies you've studied, the stories you've absorbed, these become the tools you reach for when life asks something difficult of you. Feed the mind something worth having every morning. The same discipline as breakfast because it is. Writing down your thoughts. Here is one more practice that I want to offer you. And I think it is perhaps the most underestimated discipline I know of. Keep a journal. Write in it every morning. Now, some people hear that and they think, I'm not a writer. That's not the point. This isn't about producing literature. This is about taking the thoughts that are living loosely in your mind, somewhat vague, somewhat unformed, and bringing them to clarity by writing them down. There's something that happens in the act of writing that doesn't happen in the act of thinking alone. When you write, you are forced to finish the thought. The mind can hold a half-formed idea indefinitely, turning it over and over without ever resolving it. But when you write, you must commit. You must choose the words. And in choosing the words, you discover what you actually think. I used to write things like, what am I grateful for this morning? What am I working toward? What challenged me yesterday? And what would I do differently. Not always dramatic questions, sometimes very simple ones. But the practice of writing the answers, of putting the day into language, gave me a relationship with my own life that I couldn't have gotten any other way. A journal is also a record. And if you keep one for years, something wonderful happens. You can go back. You can see where you were. You can see how you've grown or where you've been stuck. You can trace the development of your own philosophy. That's not a small thing. That is a document of a life being consciously lived. Right in the morning. Even a paragraph, even a page. Let the pen follow the thought wherever it goes. Setting the intention. The final piece of the morning I want to discuss is this. Before you begin your work, before the phone calls, before the meetings, before the demands of the day arrive at your door, take 2 minutes and set your intention. What does that mean? Practically, it means looking at those 3 commitments you wrote down the night before and saying, today, these are what I am about. Not 100 things, these 3. And then bringing your full attention to bear on them. Now, I understand that life does not always cooperate with our intentions. Things happen. The unexpected arrives. Someone needs something. A plan changes. I'm not naive about that. Life is full of variables. But here's what I've found. The person who starts the day with a clear intention, who knows what they're about that day, handles the interruptions differently from the person who started without one. They are not swept away as easily. They can deal with the disruption, handle it, and then return. Return to what? To the intention, to the commitments. Without intention, the day rules you. With intention, you at least have a fighting chance of ruling the day. And that is, when you think about it, a significant difference. Not just in productivity, but in how you feel about yourself at the end of the day. The person who intended and mostly succeeded carries themselves differently than the person who let the day run them. There's a small dignity in knowing you showed up with purpose, even on the difficult days, especially on the difficult days. Faith as the foundation. Now, I want to say something that goes a little deeper than habit and schedule. Because I think if you strip morning discipline down to mechanics alone, wake up, exercise, read, write, set intention, you miss the most important part. And the most important part is this. Why? What is it all for? I've met people who were extraordinarily disciplined, rigorous in their habits, precise in their schedules, and yet somehow hollow, missing something. Going through the motions with great efficiency, but not great meaning. Discipline without purpose is just control, and control alone is not enough to sustain a life. What I found over years of reflection and faith is that the best mornings I ever had were the ones that began with a sense of gratitude, not performance, not reciting a list, a genuine, quiet acknowledgement that being alive, being given another morning, is not something to be taken for granted. I grew up with a sense of faith that there is something larger than the individual, that life is a gift and not simply a circumstance. And whether your faith looks exactly like mine or something different, I think the underlying discipline is similar. Begin the day with humility, with the recognition that you didn't earn the sunrise, you were given it. That changes how you move through the morning. It changes the flavor of everything. The reading becomes richer. The movement becomes more like care and less like performance. The intention becomes not just a list of tasks, but a response to something, a stewardship of the day that was handed to you. I've often said that success without gratitude is not really success. It's acquisition. And there is a difference. Start the morning with a full heart, with the kind of quiet faith that says, I have been given today, let me not waste it. Let me leave you with this. I've talked today about structure, about disciplines, about practices, and all of that matters. The details matter. How you wake up matters. What you put in your mind matters. Whether you move your body, whether you write, whether you set your intention, all of it matters. But the deeper truth underneath all of it is this: who are you becoming? Because habits are not just things you do. Habits are things that shape you. Every morning that you rise with intention, you are building a particular kind of person. Every morning that you feed your mind something worth having, you are becoming someone who thinks more clearly, decides more wisely, lives more deliberately. And over the years, over the decades, the gap between the person who has spent their mornings well and the person who has not becomes extraordinary. Not because of any single day. No single morning changes a life. But the accumulation of mornings, that is where a life is built. I think about young people especially. If you are in your 20s or early 30s and you hear this, you have before you one of the great advantages a person can have: time to build. The habits you establish now will serve you or cost you for the next 30, 40, 50 years. Take that seriously. And for those further along in life, I've said this before, and I believe it, it is never too late to begin again. The morning doesn't ask your age. It doesn't ask what you did yesterday. It simply arrives and offers itself. The question every morning is the same: what will you do with it? Not in a dramatic sense, not some grand performance, just quietly, consistently, day after day after day, what will you do with it? That question, taken seriously and answered well, is the foundation of everything.